Peace, y'all. It's Camps in the Oracle, and unfortunately I am having to do a video on a topic that I really hate to cover, but it has to be covered. The very first thing I want to say, if you could excuse the background, you know what kind of family we are if you've been watching us. So yeah, it's conscious parenting. We kind of let the kids be kids, and so this is one of those moments. And I want to get this information out to you as soon as possible, so I'm just not able to go and seclude myself in the moment to get this out. But this information must get out tonight. So Jacob Blake was shot by police officers, shot 7 times as reported, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I want to give you all the decoding as to this particular ritual, okay, and what it actually is doing. Now, Jacob Blake in Gematria actually equals to 62. This is in simple Gematria, equals 62. These are some of the things that have this exact same equivalent. I did English, simple Gematria, and Jewish Gematria. So some of these may be one of the other. The very first one that stood out was takes mark of the beast. Yeah, you heard that right. Takes mark of the beast. That is what his name is synonymous to in Gematria. Can't make this up. The second one that stood out the most was tyrannical. Okay? And there's no need for me to decode that. The third one was Mason cry. Okay? Mason cry. There's no need for me to break that down, because we already gave you all the information on the Masonic Lodge and how these police shootings, these really public lynchings, are done near Masonic lodges. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. Now, with Jacob Blake again and the 62, which really stood out, that led me to Elohim. It led me to Mason. And it also led to, get this, Floyd, as in George Floyd. It also led me to dollar, and it also led me to vote. Can't make this up. And the reason that's significant is because we know the intergalactic battle that is happening between these different divine ones and beings and gods and goddesses and thought forms, egregores. Everybody is fighting to be able to own the consciousness, right, of people. We know why Masonry is important here. The dollar portion is important because right now we're seeing the death of the dollar. And this happened on Washington Street, right, near Washington Street. And we know Washington was the first president, and he's on the dollar, all right. It representing vote is key because they are trying to get people to vote, and they have even used Cardi B in an interview with Biden to get people to vote who may not even care about voting, but because they are fans of Cardi B, they have used her divine feminine energy once again to as a ritualistic ceremony of high magic to supplant the sovereignty of the people, of young people specifically, of a lot of melanated women specifically, which are like some of her top followers of all races. But let's just point to the things here that we know within our community that we see. And one of the things that she talked about in the interview was the shootings, right, of black people by police officers. So this is no coincidence. And I recently just figured out that when you vote, what happens is you're forfeiting a portion of your willpower to the person you are voting for. So whatever the ultimate agenda is behind the person you vote for, you create a soul contract with that person. So this is why they push voting so much. That was a little light code that I was intending to share with you guys. Plague was the very next word, and the reason that is important is because a plague just broke out in California, and this was reported by Dabu 777 on YouTube. Okay. Had a minor interruption. All right. So, so check out the information about the plague that they have found in California. Actually, this just recently happened within days of this happening. Maybe not even a full day. The next thing that it led to was the word riot. Okay. And it also led to the word Dr. Fauci. You can look it up yourself. It really did. And we already know what that means. So this is going to be used, right, to cause more chaos, right, to stir up more energy for their outcome with the riots. And I'm sure the riots have begun. Okay, excuse me, y'all. About to choke off the tea. Okay, the next word with the Gematria was Gog and Magog. And we know that this is it's really a story that was told in the Bible pointing to this particular epoch of being in the age of Aquarius and the world ending and a new world beginning. And so it would be a whole other video to go into the whole Gog and Magog thing, but I'm sure you guys know what it is. This was also connected to the word Sabbath and Shabbat, right? Pay attention to this because you know that the lion energy, the lion gate portal, the segment energy, the Sirius energy, right, has been coming through very, very strongly. And this happened on Sunday, which is Sabbath to some people. Let's keep going because there's so much more. This also was equivalent to the cosmic egg. Okay, so being that a new simulated reality, right, augmented reality, a synthetic artificial reality is being birthed. This is representation of the cosmic egg, but reverse engineered, where they are creating their own cosmic egg. All right. This also was equivalent to the black sheep. And we already know what's going on there. You can equate sheep to masses, to even blind masses who follow a shepherd or a savior, right? And they are black. And this also represents being an outcast. But what tripped me out was the very next word was sheriff. I'm not even going to get into sheriff. Who shot the sheriff? The next word was the ark. And the ark of the covenant is within us. And so this is very important. That points to Genesis, genetics, epigenetics, a change of DNA, right? Because that is what the whole story of the ark was about. So that points to those two things. It was also equivalent to demonic being. This was equivalent to change DNA, become. Change our DNA to become what? It was also equivalent to SHTF, which is shit hits the fan. Numbers always tell a story. People lie, but numbers don't. This was also connected to Enki and Enlil. What are the odds of that? And some of the numbers that are also associated with Enki and Enlil are 666 and 111. Remember, we've been talking about the research by Dan Winter into the quantum physics, the metaphysics of the Enki Enlil story. And he got into the sacred geometry, the frequency, the DNA of it. So that's why that's important, because we are in the middle of an intergalactic warfare where many different races of multidimensional beings, ETs, extraterrestrials, those in the inner earth, it's all coming to a head. This is the ultimate war of all times happening. Now, y'all, this is when I was searching Kenosha, so this tied it all in. Now, the very next thing I want to point out to you guys, to just hold on to this, because I'm going to get into some stuff that is probably going to be trauma triggering for some of us, because this definitely was a trauma trigger for me. So if you want to avoid this, that is up to you. But enlightenment sometimes means sitting in emotions that are triggering and traumatic and they don't feel good in their purpose. What you can do as an alchemist, as a spiritually awakened soul, is to take that trigger, to take that trauma and create something else from the deep impulse of the emotion that it sparks within you. Okay? So be creative. Whatever comes to you is right. In the words of Bobby Hemmett, the best ritual is the one that you make up yourself. So when you are triggered and when you experience trauma, don't let these people manipulate you. You don't have to allow the powers that be to manipulate you. Okay? You are awakened for a purpose. And not only can you take the trauma that this trigger causes and transmute that energy, but you can even work with the energy, especially you ladies, using the energy of having a womb where creation, where life is kept and created. Use that energy and call down protection for those who are becoming victims to this. Okay, so when FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was asked what, in his opinion, was the single greatest threat to the United States of America, he responded, Negro unity. Now, you just let that one sink in.
Because it's on your report.
Okay, I'm determined to get this done. Bear with me, y'all. It's late at night and I'm tired. I'm kind of off my schedule. I got the kids off schedule, but you know, y'all already know we committed over here to doing this, and sometimes it just requires sacrifice, and so, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, so back to the shooting, Kenosha, Wisconsin. So now protest, aka Antifa, aka Black Lives Matter, aka riots, aka Marxism, aka Albert Pike. A lot of the teachers that have come to this point, whenever you hear these words, it's definitely a test. You know, it's definitely a test. So police shoot black man from behind. Okay. Protests erupt. Listen to the word erupt. We gave the breakdown of the eruptions, explosions, and the fires with the Mayan, the video we did explaining the ancestral lineage and the knowledge from the Mayans. We gave that breakdown. So check how they use the words. That's important. And we're teaching about words and numbers and the use of the two to manipulate, simulate the perspective of those within the reality simulation. All right. Now, they're setting garbage trucks on fire. Specifically, that's what this news article says. That kind of stood out to me. I'm like, why do they need to air a live video on ABC Channel 7 News? Pay attention to the number 7, because it's going to come up again, of garbage trucks being set on fire. Well, who protested peacefully with the I am a man? Who did that? Martin Luther King, right? Right. And Martin Luther King supported that. And people, the men of Memphis who were garbage men, had to let the world know, I am a man. So this is the significance of the garbage trucks being used. Okay. And the fire elements combined with it. Okay, none of this is a coincidence. All right. Now, let's see. They have implemented an emergency curfew as a result of this. And I'm going to get into that because when you look at the time of the emergency curfew, the symbolism of the number 7 and the use of it fits into that as well. All right. Now, Jacob Blake was 29 and he was shot multiple times on Sunday as he leaned into his SUV with his young children inside. This was done in front of his 3 sons. Do y'all hear this? In front of his 3 sons. 3 police officers are now on administrative leave as the investigation continues, and their names have not been released. Yeah, they're always going to protect their own, which is why we must learn how to have unity, and we must learn how to protect our own. Now, the video of the shooting, of course, can be easily viewed and found anywhere. even though the names of these men that did it can't be found. Boy. So, remember the very old book by Rudolf Steiner that explained the soul economics of how they trap souls within these Masonic lodges and use them, right? And so that was the first time that we were enlightened as to these rituals and as to the circumference, the distance, the longitude, latitude, and even ley lines of these particular lodges. Now, this is really deep. It's something called Picatrix. And I'll be posting more information about the Picatrix, but this is the layout, as above, so below, when you are manipulating the energy of the cosmos with events and particular locations for a desired outcome. All right, a very ancient teaching. Now, the lodge that was near during this shooting, guess what it's called? The Unity Lodge. UNITY. People, we have to learn how to heal our trauma so that we can have unity. But they are calling for unity of their people, okay? The number associated with this was 367. That is the particular lodge, FNAM, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. As you can see here, I'm going to put this there. But check out how close this lodge is to where the shooting happened. They're 3 minutes away from each other. 3 minutes away from each other. Let me keep going. Now, let me get into the symbolism of 40, because this happens specifically on 40th Street. Okay? And whenever you hear the number 40, you already know most of it. But I'm going to give you a read down. The symbolism. According to the Bible, it is the number of the waiting, the preparation, the test, or the punishment. Also, the Bible often resorts to the number 40 when starts a new chapter of the history of the salvation. On the other hand, 40 would indicate the duration of a generation or a long period whose we ignore the exact length. It symbolizes the death with oneself and the spiritual rebirth. Now, according to R. Allenby, it is the achievement of a cycle in the world, or rather the rhythm of the cyclic repetitions in the universe. This all goes right back to the teaching that we shared with y'all yesterday on the galactic harmonics and sacred geometry and frequencies and vibrations and words and the powers of these things and locations. It also says, according to St. Augustine, and remember we talked about, anyway, just watch the video if you haven't watched it, because a lot of the stuff we did cover. 40 expresses the perfection, because the law was given in 10 commandments. Then it is through the whole world that the law has been preached, and the whole world is composed of 4 parts: Orient and Occident, South and North. Therefore, by multiplying 10 by 4, we obtain 40. Or, well, it is by the 4 books of the gospel that the law is accomplished. They're using this energy to accomplish and ground the laws of the new earth in which they will rule. Okay? 40 represents the man incorporated in the universe and combating the prince of the disorder, according to Claude of St. Martin. It represents the complete and sufficient period to finish a work, according to Le Courrier. It also represents the eternal hell, according to J. Boehm, because it is the constraint with the cycles of the incarnation, so this just goes right back to the video last night. You know, the incarnation of whose form does not change. And we talked about how to use the words and understanding your galactic signature to help you create to help you form something, to learn how to work with the cycles. The Gregorian calendar is all about constraints. All right. It also it corresponds to the 13th Hebraic letter. Remember, we talked about the 13 moon calendar and the importance of that. It corresponds to Mem, and that goes into a whole other conversation from Kek and the entities that they are using that were learned about in ancient Kemet. That's a whole other thing. Okay, we'll save that one for later. If y'all want to drop something below that, it'd be great too to add to this. And 13, Hebraic letter, okay, it is also associated with the arcane 13 of the tarot cards, which is the death, marking the completion of a stage. 40 days after the birth, Jesus was presented to the temple of Jerusalem for his legal purification according to the established law. We know Jesus is a representation of Christ's consciousness. He's also a representation of what we would call the messianic energy. Red Pillar from Know the Ledge Media does a really good job breaking down the messianic energy. And we can see the attack here. The legal purification. What? All right. The 40 days of the fast of Jesus in the desert is associated with this. The 40 days separate the ascension of Jesus and his resurrection. So you see the recreation of the resurrection. You see the reverse engineering of ascension. They are triggering trauma to stop the ascension, to stop the resurrection. Now, it also is related to the flood of Noah, which lasted 40 days. And remember, I told you all the Gematria was the ark. So this is the restructuring of DNA as well. Now, Elijah walked 40 days and 40 nights before to reach the Horeb Mount. He fasted during 40 days before to begin his public ministry, and he remained 40 days on the Carmel Mount. And is so much within that context. We could go on and on. Even the priest Eli had been judge of Israel for 40 years. All right. Now, Moses was 40 years old when he was called by God, and then he killed an Egyptian and escaped in the desert of Midian. He kept the herd of Jethro during 40 years, and he resided finally 40 days and 40 nights to the summit of the Mount Sinai before to receive the tables of the law. And tables of the law before the Mandela effect, which is just them editing the timeline. It was tablets of the law, not tables. If you go back in the Old Testament, it used to say that he came down a mountain with the tablets of the law, and now it says tables. How the hell do you carry tables, 2 tables down a mountain, up in age as an old man? Don't even make sense. But the Bible is a book of high magic, and so they are editing that as well to get the desired outcome. So that is why the Bible is changing. It's using quantum physics and metaphysics to do that. So that's very high magic. And it's a lot there we can get into. What Moses really represents. Moshe. Brother Sanchez did a really good bill with Oni Osiris about breaking down Moses. Okay. So go check that out because it's relevant. Now, it also represented the 40-day Goliath defied David. We know David is of a messianic lineage. So we're not talking about specific people, y'all. So we would be the David and white supremacy and the whole police force, the whole system set up that we were brought over here into as slaves. We are viewed as the Messiah lineage. We are viewed as the David. The black sheep of the family, the one who was the weakest and the youngest, and he couldn't do this and couldn't do that. And they were so surprised when he was chosen by King Saul. So this is representation of fighting a giant. And right now we are battling a giant. Now the children of Israel lived during 40 years in the constraint with the Philistines. Remember, the word constraint keeps coming up. Remember, the children of Israel, Isis, Ra, El, keeps coming up. The Hebrews wandered 40 years in the desert as well. Just check this. And with all that went on with Nick Cannon and the truth about who the true Hebrews are and such and such and such and such and the upset of the small hats, it's no coincidence that a lot of this Hebrew, biblical, Old Testament energy is being resurfaced and used. Now, another thing that really stood out was that the embalming of Jacob was prolonged during 40 days in Genesis 50:3. Did y'all hear that? The exact name, the 40 days, the 40th street, and it speaks about embalming, which we know is a ritual of death after someone has died. So you see the context here. Now, it also represents the reign of David on Israel, lasted 40 years, just as the reign of Solomon in Jerusalem. Solomon, your soul, man. They want the soul. And with Trump being in office, and he's a representation of King Cyrus, he's a representation, possible reincarnation. He has a lot of the archetypal alignment with the king, with Solomon, which was the wisest and the richest. Right? So just check out how this is happening. Look at Trump's connection with Jerusalem. Look at the coin that he was placed on. And what is on that coin? The lion, the tribe of Judah. I did a video on that, and you can search for it. It's somewhere in the video section of the channel, where I broke that down, and it was connected to R. Kelly and the death of Aaliyah. Okay, so let me skip around. Okay. Now, the 40 is the number of chapters of the book of Exodus of the Old Testament. And as we know, we are going through an Exodus, coming out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, coming out of 3-dimensional consciousness into 4-dimensional consciousness and higher. We're going through an Exodus. We are receiving light body activations. We're going through an Exodus. We are awakening as a collective. We're going through an Exodus, but they are also created a false Exodus. In the year 2020, which is really 2012, you will always see two things: Jason and Boaz, twin cities, twins, pillars. You're going to constantly see these double digits, these master numbers that are packed with energy for them to use. This is also connected to the 40 years after the crucifixion of the Jesus Christ, that Jerusalem was taken by the Romans and that the temple was destroyed. Is no need for me to even decode that one right there. Y'all already know what's up. The next one was Jesus received 40 blows of whips during his whipping. Do y'all hear this? According to the visions of Maria Valtorta. However, according to visions of Mary Agreda, pay attention to the names here, Jesus would have received 5,115 blows of whip. Now, there's 2 6s in there. You got the 1 and 1 with 11 in the middle, which is the pillars. You have 5 on each side. It's a lot of numerology packed in that as well. Now, the number of years that no man and no beast would have crossed Egypt, according to an old prophecy, is related to this number of 40 as well. According to the Book of Secrets of Enoch, the 4 rivers of the terrestrial paradise are subdivided by 40 and surround all the earth. Wow. Now, according to the Egyptians, it is the number of days necessary in order that the soul becomes definitively delivered of his body. Wow. Indeed, following the death of the physical body, the etheric body spends globally 40 days to be dissolved in the universe. As long as it is not fully dissolved and that particles which constitute it do not join the various elements of the nature, the conscious of the defunct will remain linked more or less closely to the terrestrial world in which he evolved. This is why a religious ceremony is celebrated 40 days after death in some traditions, in order to facilitate the definitive liberation of the conscious of the being with his habits and his material fasteners. It should, however, not confuse with what is called the etheric energy, which it is totally extracted of the body after the 3 days following the death. And remember, it was 3 officers that did this. It's so much in there. I can just see the comments now because y'all going to be dropping some major gems.